Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast series where we explore ways to support and empower youth in leading healthier lives. I'm Max MacDonald, and I'll be your host for this journey into topics that matter to today's youth. In each episode, we'll dive into discussions about physical health, mental well-being, professional development, and more. Our goal is to provide valuable insights, tips, and inspiration to help you live your best life. Through interviews with experts and practical advice, we aim to equip you with the tools needed to make positive choices and create a healthier future. So whether you're looking to become healthier, manage stress, or navigate your path to professional success, join us as we embark on this empowering journey together. Get ready to live well and thrive, one episode at a time. So welcome to the Living Well podcast series, empowering youth to live healthier lives. I'm Max MacDonald, and today we dive into making informed choices about your diet with our guest, James Richardson from JM Nutrition. James is a University of Prince Edward Island graduate and a registered dietitian who focuses his practice on various areas including fitness and sports nutrition, chronic disease management, development of healthy eating habits, and more. Our taste preferences develop over time, but it's never too late to switch to a healthier lifestyle. Let's explore the connection between diet and how it impacts our overall well-being. Welcome, James, and thank you for being with us here today. James, how do you think early dietary habits shape long-term health outcomes?
So that's a question that I get all the time, and we spend during school learning about it quite a bit. So it's no secret that how a youth and adolescent eats during their childhood will shape their dietary habits going forward into their adulthood. And there has been some correlation with this in a lot of recent studies over the last 50 years of how it can increase the risk of certain diseases such as type 2 diabetes or obesity. But again, something like health and something like diabetes, obesity is so multifactorial. So you can't completely gauge it just on dietary practices alone, but it's such a large part of the puzzle, piece of the puzzle, I guess. So developing healthy relationships with food as a youth is also very important for developing positive body image, mental health as they grow older. Developing, you don't want them to become a picky eater or practice regularly skipping meals. And a lot of that comes from the role models as, your parents, your older siblings, how they eat in the household as a youth tends to follow suit with that. But yeah.
Okay, so yeah, there's definitely some influences from people around you, like your family. Do you see any influences from people who are not necessarily part of your family, like things you might see in advertising or even on a closer social scale, like people you go to school with?
Yeah, and sometimes that can, especially at the ages of maybe 10 to 17, where they're getting on social media, they're exploring the internet, watching TV shows, and they're seeing all these ads on TV or influencers telling them to eat a certain way. That can be even more have even more impact on their dietary patterns and sometimes even what their family life can look like. And I'm sure throughout this conversation, I'll be mentioning a lot about how to navigate marketing and knowing how to recognize red flags about that. But yeah, that is a huge, huge part of what influences youth dietary patterns.
For sure. And do you think there's any sort of like impact that the things you see other kids eating around you? Do you think that influences kids as well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, their environment too. Especially when they're going to school, they're spending almost just as much time around their friends, their peers, as their family. So, of course, that would impact their dietary patterns quite a bit.
For sure. Can there also be on top of like long-term health effects, like any short-term health effects as well from a diet? Not necessarily even like a diet, but like say like not drinking enough water or drinking too much caffeine. Can any of those things affect a young person's development?
Oh, for sure. Not necessarily development. You wouldn't look at development as like a short-term um, impact, but obviously things where your diet, maybe, if you go a day without drinking very much fluid at all, you're going to be severely dehydrated, which can lead to decreased cognitive function, decreased athletic performance. Maybe they're an athlete. So those are things you also have to consider, which can directly lead to long-term effects too. So if your youth is constantly dehydrated or they're not meeting their fluid needs, their cognitive performance at school could be worse. So it could affect their learning, which could over time develop into maybe decreased literacy. Then if an athlete is not getting enough carbohydrates, enough nutrition, it could also affect their growth rate. As they grow older, it could lead to chronic fatigue, them getting sick more often. But yeah.
I see. Okay, that's a very in-depth answer. I appreciate that.
Yep.
What are some of the psychological factors influencing food choices among young people?
hmm So yeah, there's so many. Again, it's such a multifactorial thing. It's hard to ever pinpoint with something with nutrition, pinpoint it to one particular cause. But things like body image, um, influencers on social media, marketing, we already mentioned that quite a bit. Maybe they're an athlete and they have certain fitness goals. They could lead them to trying different diets that they see other athletes follow. It could be beneficial. It could also be harmful depending on the information where they get it. So it's important that they know where to get this information from a safe, reliable source rather than maybe just some person on media that doesn't necessarily know what they're talking about. They might know what they're talking about to an extent. They might be saying it in a damaging way to the audience.
Mm,
Um, but then also the family patterns. Maybe it's a family that regularly eats lunch and dinners together. That can be a positive effect on their dietary patterns. It could nurture healthy relationships with food. But yeah.
What about any kind of emotional factor that's affecting a child, like how they're feeling that day, or maybe
Mhm.
they had a negative interaction with their parents in the morning, they don't feel like eating at night. Is there anything, can their emotions affect that in any way?
Yeah, for sure. Your emotions are can be directly tied to not only your appetite but your eating patterns. I'm sure you've heard before about emotional eating, which tends to lead to the overconsumption of highly palatable, so foods that tend to be really fatty, high in sugar. Maybe somebody's having a bad day, and then they go for the container of Oreos, and all of a sudden they ate the entire Oreo container because they're just looking for a form of comfort or a way to increase their mood a little bit, which doesn't tend to lead to healthy eating patterns in the long term.
I see.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the family does seem to have a really big impact on how these young people end up eating.
Yeah.
Is there any ways that families can promote healthy eating habits in their households?
hmm So I believe having planned times that you eat as a family is important. So sitting down as a family with minimal distractions at maybe supper time, and being able to incorporate the family or the kids into the cooking process in any way you can make it part of like an occasion, making eating an occasion versus a necessity. Minimal distractions, so avoid maybe watching TV while you're eating dinner, and making it a safe place too for your family to enjoy a meal. I know it's sometimes it's easy to start talking about chores or things that you guys have to do because everybody's together, but sometimes it's better just to make it a relaxing environment. Maybe discuss how their day went or what they're going to do this weekend. So it's going to be something that they look forward to rather than something that they have to go to because they're gonna start talking about homework or chores the entire time.
I like that a lot.
Mhm.
I've never heard that before, that advice to keep like business out of meals. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. Do you think there's outside of that, there's any other ways a family can influence healthy eating habits? Do you think that factors like time can affect some families' ability to sit down and have a meal free from distraction?
Yeah. Of course, it's never always possible for families to have meals all the time, but yeah. So if you're rushing out the door to maybe a soccer practice and stuff, you're probably not going to have as much time to sit down and enjoy the meal. But it doesn't have to be every day of the week. Even if you can plan it on certain days of the week that you know you're going to have time, maybe on Sunday evenings and Saturday afternoons, then maybe someday during the week. It doesn't always have to be 100% all the time, but working towards that is a good goal.
For sure. I love that goal.
Yeah. The famous saying that a lot of dietitians like to preach is called "You provide, they decide." So you can provide them healthy food, have healthy food options available for them, but you can't force them to eat because that can cause the opposite effect. It becomes a chore to eat, the broccoli on the plate. So
Mm.
don't get discouraged. Exposure is key. Show them that you yourself are enjoying the food at dinner time. Have it available for them. Don't be over pushy. Don't get into a fight or an argument trying to force them to eat the certain foods. And don't put too much pressure on them, because there has been a lot of studies too that showed families that weren't over pushy. The youth didn't feel over pressured to have to eat those certain foods, had increased fitness levels and more positive health overall.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it really is like one of the most challenging aspects of like anything with children. I work with children for a living.
Okay.
Um, get them to eat food that's not something that they're used to is really challenging,
Mhm.
especially when it's like compared with like processed foods that they are used to that are, scientifically designed to be easy to eat. It can be really challenging.
Yeah.
So I like that advice, because, a lot of parents probably see some pretty negative results when they try to force things on their kids.
Mhm.
So just a reminder to take your time. Let them know that you like the veggies. They're delicious.
Yeah.
Try them yourself.
Yeah. Exposure is key. Just don't get discouraged. It's the main thing. Yeah.
Right, don't get discouraged. That's called
Yeah.
another great thing to write home about.
Yeah.
Speaking about the actual meals that people eat, I think people usually associate some. It's a pretty general idea of what's good for them, what's not good for them. But are there any misconceptions you can think about that young people might have about diet nutrition?
hmm yeah, misconceptions usually fall again under what they see on social media and marketing. Um, are you asking for just the common ones that they may experience, or
Yeah, common ones or any things that you've heard any clients of yours say, I thought this was good, but it's actually not as good as they think it is.
yeah, I work with a lot of athletes, and I do work with quite a bit of like youth athletes as well. And I see a common misconception with also with adults too, that carbohydrates are bad for you. The
Mm,
carbohydrates will make you gain weight, make you fat, things like that, which is fortunately not true at all. Carbohydrates is an essential nutrient that everybody needs in their diet. Having at least half of your intake come from carbohydrates, and if you're an athlete, it could be upwards of 60-65% of your intake, because that is the body's main preferred fuel source. It's what your brain needs to function. It's what your body wants to use to move your muscles, to recover.
I've heard that before as well, that carbs
Yeah,
are bad, should be avoided. Don't eat too much pasta, stuff like that.
yeah.
Are there any other foods you can think of that people think are maybe good for them, but are not good for them?
I mean, one that's all the buzz lately, especially in the sports nutrition world, is Prime, especially for young kids as well. And that's honestly, it's marketing. They're just masterful at marketing, and kids think that it's some super drink, or it's you know they even think it's a sports drink. And coming from a sports nutrition dietitian perspective, it's not properly formulated to be a sports drink. Just
Mm,
classic Gatorade is far better in terms of rehydration than Prime. So yeah, that's just an example of social media influencers constantly throwing it in the face, drink Prime, drink Prime, drink Prime. But
right.
reality is, it's not ideal for a young guy or even an adult to be drinking it
I
regularly.
see. Always important to be critical about what you're seeing a lot in social media, for sure.
Yeah.
Anything you can think of that people think is unhealthy, but actually is healthy?
I mean, I could just default again to like carbohydrates, but a common
Oh,
one,
right.
even too, in carbohydrates is breads. Breads are not. I would not consider bread an unhealthy source, not even an unhealthy carbohydrate source. Ideally, something like multigrain is better because it's higher in fiber. It's got more minerals and vitamins in it. But again, if somebody's main preferred bread source is white bread, yeah, they can eat white bread. It's not going to cause them to be unhealthy.
Right.
It's all about a diet that's full of variety and moderation.
I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've definitely thought about a lot is how,
Mhm.
you hear a lot about bread, specifically how like processed it is, the white bread is, but it's
Yeah.
just a carb like anything else. How important do you think it is for individuals to understand and interpret information on product labels when making food choices?
Yeah, product labels are a fantastic way to get a better understanding of what type of nutrition is in the food. I do think that before you can really utilize nutrition labels, I think you need a basic understanding of what that nutrition is. in what it's saying, like, what's a protein and what's its role, what's a carbohydrate, what's its role, fat, and why you should be eating more of this and less of that. But again, it's a great tool for making a more informed choice about foods you're eating, particularly packaged foods, because it can be more difficult to navigate what's actually in it. So a great rule of thumb to think about is there should be a percentages next to things like sugar, sodium, and if it says 15% or more, that would be considered a lot. If it's 5% or less, that would be considered a little. It's not a perfect system, but it's a general rule of thumb. And it's also, those percentages are based off an average 2,000 calorie diet. It's not applicable for everybody. So an example would be a highly active athlete is going to need far more carbohydrates. They're going to need more sodium. They're going to need just more calories, protein in general than somebody who's not maybe as active or a smaller person in them. So you do have to understand that it's not an absolute system.
Right.
Mhm.
Is there anything you personally would like to see added to nutritional labels that might help with this?
It's a hard system. I think it's definitely flawed. They have improved it lately in Canada, where they added like the percentages for sugar. They increased the font size for more like the calories are increased font size, so it's easier to navigate for somebody that might not be as informed. Um, yeah, it's tricky because like as a dietitian, I could use a tool as like a way to be able to scale it to your weight or something like that, but that would make it much more difficult for
Yeah.
somebody that's an entry level knowledge on nutrition to use it. And that's what its main role is, to help those people, because the reality is somebody that's really informed on nutrition, they don't need to rely on nutrition labels as much. But I
Right.
think what's the absolute best goal for anybody, whether they're a young kid or an older adult that knows everything about nutrition, and it's not necessarily over fixating on the actual nutrition labels itself, because it's really easy to become overly excessive on the numbers of the food, and you lose touch of the actual food that you're eating. So rather than focusing too much on the numbers, I would recommend just focusing on the overall diet and making sure that it's a full of a variety of minimally processed foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean plant-based protein sources with also lean protein sources as well. That will round out your diet to give an overall healthy diet rather than focusing too much on the numbers.
No, that's great. So far what I've heard is that we definitely can change our habits over time. Your early habits definitely can be changed as well, even if they don't start off great, through the choices of people around you. Uh, Many factors influence why people eat what they want to eat. Many factors, anything, even including seeing ads that could be paid for on a social media site. Sitting down with your family, fantastic to eat a meal. Love
Yep.
that. No distract or minimal distractions if you can. Common misconceptions. Carbs, not bad for you. Carbs are good. Thumbs
Carbs are
up.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for the last one, that maintaining a wide variety of food choices, sticking to whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean or plant protein and lean protein sources. I think those are pretty much the the key points so far. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview so far?
That summarized a lot of the main points perfectly. Like the cornerstone of every healthy diet, as I said, is variety with those fruit, veggies, etc. Like I mentioned, but also knowing that anything can fit into anybody's diet unless you have some type of restriction due to a medical condition, of course. So following something like 80-20 rule or 70-30 rule, so sticking to foods that are more ideal or healthier 70% of the time, 30% of the time leave room to, go get some pizza with friends, or maybe, just let loose a little bit and enjoy life, and then just go back to eating foods that you would more normally eat. But avoiding like an absolutist idea of what's healthy and what's not healthy, because really that is more of a blurred line.
Yeah, I like that. Leave
Mhm.
some space to enjoy
Yeah.
yourself as well. It's your
Yep.
life, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so that sounds like a great recap of all the points. Is there anything else you'd like to, just before I close up with some closing remarks, anything else you'd like to promote? Like I think you run a clinic as well, right? If you want to promote that, or how people can contact you.
Yeah, so I work with JM Nutrition. and they do a lot of client-based work. So, practitioners like myself can work directly with a family, or maybe your child, or with you directly. And they're great. They can do everything online based. I'll be accepting clients out of PEI come probably in mid-June. And I'm from PEI as well myself.
Sure. Are there any other trusted resources you would use if people have any more questions about nutrition or where they can learn more?
Mhm. Ideally, the best place to get advice if you're reading a blog online, or either from government sources, or if it's a writer, ideally the writer should be a registered dietitian. As I mean, I'm one myself, but
Mhm.
of
No, I know
course I'm
what you
going to
mean.
push that forward. But I mean, we are the nutrition experts on, like, not only the science. The thing that separates a dietitian from maybe some other experts in nutrition, like a food scientist, is that we're able to transfer that information, the objective information found in studies, into a realistic way that a person can apply to their life in a healthy way. Because just because it's objectively the healthiest doesn't mean it's the healthiest for your health, for your body, for your mind overall. If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect
Yeah,
sense. You're just the intermediate in, like, they might find something in a study like,
yeah,
something very scientific will happen if you eat like this amount of food, but you're the person who has to tell a real life person what is
yeah.
good for them and how they're going to implement it in their lives, which is
Hmm.
not like a laboratory.
Yeah,
People are busy. They do things in their life. They don't have time to sit around and eat exactly 386 grams of a certain type of food each day.
yeah, yeah. It's being able to apply that information in a realistic way. Yeah, you're right.
Right, in a
Yeah.
realistic way, exactly. All right, we'll just wrap it up by saying, is there anything else that you want to pitch, James? Anything else you want to say besides like where they can contact you, an email or?
Yeah, so I'm a registered dietitian that practices out of JM Nutrition, which is a fantastic company for working in a wide variety of dietary challenges or dietary recommendations from registered dietitians like myself. You can reach them at jmnutrition.com, and they're fantastic. They can set you up with a free phone consult, and pair you up with a practitioner that works within your goals. And yeah, myself will be accepting clients from PEI ideally in mid-June.
Sounds good, great. And we just want to take a moment to make sure all the listeners take some time to prioritize your nutrition and try to adopt a few healthier eating habits based on some of the things we've talked about in this podcast so far. Following the 70-30 rule or the 80-20 rule that James laid out earlier sounds like a fantastic way to start for me. It's a great way to have some balance in your life between the things you already love and some things you might learn to love in the future. So I wanted to say thank you again, James, for coming on the podcast. We really appreciated having you here.
And thanks for having me.